Just have to see, that's what Mike wants.
Yeah, just we've got some literature for you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hello.
So I finally got you the attachment,
Thank you.
and so I guess, why don't we just start by going over that?
Yeah, we can do that. We were hoping as a group to have had it a little bit earlier and then to have been able to meet as a group prior to, and we didn't get it until yesterday. So we want to listen, but I don't think we're in any way ready to, kind of respond to anything today. But I am very confused with it, so I would like a walkthrough if possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm waiting for some additional handouts.
Okay.
I hope you understood, we have accepted your health insurance proposal contingent on getting a salary settlement as well, because the dollars are definitely linked. And so we're not going to sign a separate TA on health insurance right now, okay?
Yep.
One thing I'd like to do is, just as a preface to the salary discussion, hand this out, which is a reconstruction of salary adjustments for the time period beginning FY 2005, coming up to present, okay, FY 17, in terms of the changes that have been made. And, for instance, it starts out and it points out that back in FY 6 and FY 7, 2 steps were eliminated, one in each year, and a new step was eliminated each year, so that the hiring salary at step 3, became a much higher salary than what had been the base salary, okay? I also want to point out something. You'll see in FY 2005, the step 1 salary, which was the base salary that year, was $28,672, okay? And that right off the grid.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you're
so sorry.
No Filters episode.
If you go over to a column that says hidden base,
Yep.
Yeah.
so what has happened is the hiring salary is not the base salary in the salary grid. There still is tracked what would be this step 1 salary, which is the base salary. And anytime there is an increase to base, the increase to the base is this number that starts off at 28,672, and then it comes over to the column which says hidden base. So if there's a 2% increase on the base, the 2% increase is on the hidden column numbers, okay? And then that translates through the index in the salary grid to adjust all the other cells in the grid.
Why was that done, Steve? Do you
That was the agreement at the time, and it is certainly something that can be revisited, but it hasn't been in these number of years. And if you check with Norm, I think he'll tell you, oh yeah, we understand. And there are a number of salary grids around the state that have a hidden base. And part of the issue is that once you change that base, if you're going to preserve the index, which, we'll look at that, you have to completely rebuild the index.
Okay.
And so if you don't change, if you keep the base, based on this hidden base, then you can continue with the same index without adjusting it. And so I just wanted to point that out. But then, in terms of base increases, what are just straight base increases, if you see, starting in FY08, 2.29%, 2.25, 2.25. FY11, there was 0 increase to base. I'm sure you all remember FY11 was the year of the strike, and there was really a status quo contract for the year of the strike. People got step movement, but nothing else happened to the contract for that year of the strike. That's why that's a 0. In FY12, there's a 0.83% increase on base. In that year, the grid was expanded so that it went from having a top step at 18 to having a top step of 19, which is what the current grid is. And whenever you add a step at the top, there's a significant additional cost associated with that in the year that you add that step, because you've got all these people who normally would not be moving are suddenly moving. Okay. And then you've got the percentages, and then in FY15, there was 0% on base. What had happened that year was there had been a large increase in health insurance, and the interest was in staying status quo with health insurance, not giving up grandfather plan status. And so everyone was provided step movement, but the agreement was that there was not going to be an increase on base that year, and that was a one-year contract. Okay. So in terms of the base increases from FY08, because I'm not trying to plug in what happened in those earlier years, to FY17, 11.87% in increases to base over that period of time. If you factor in the step increase that was available over that period of time, employees who had step movement, which would be the majority of employees, 42% in additional increase. Okay. Then if you go over the COLA, cost of living or CPI, whichever you want to look at, over the period, and this is 2008 to 2017, is 16.9 to 17.6, so roughly we'll say 17%. So base increase alone was covering approximately 12%, and those with step movement, we're getting additional compensation. And importantly, in 2006, FY6, FY7, and FY12, everybody got step movement because we added a new step to the bottom of the grid, which is essentially an additional 12% on top of what was the base increase of 11.87%. Okay? So our point in bringing that to your attention is that, in fact, the salary increases that have been provided over that period of time have, coupled with the addition of steps to the salary grid, have more than made up for cost of living increases over that same period of time, given that three new steps have been added to the grid, and then the actual increases in base salary. Okay?
Okay.
So that's one thing to understand with our salary proposal. Another thing is in terms of, from the board's perspective, we're changing health insurance plans. And, you know, I understand you don't know which plan you may sign up for.
Right.
But what is clear is that anyone who signs up for the CDHP Gold plan will have less money taken out of their salary for health insurance in FY18 than they had taken out of their salary in FY17.
That's correct.
And even with the 20% of copay that you might have on the CDHP Gold, you would still have less. than
And the
you're
board
paying.
would have less that
That's
they were
right.
paying as well, so
That's
it's,
right.
it's both of us.
Okay,
Yeah.
but there are savings.
Right.
And those are real savings for you. And we're actually sharing those savings.
Yeah.
And the savings are a little bit larger for you than they are for the board, okay? And, you know, just so you understand, our understanding is that the governor's approach was that none of those savings should be going to employees, okay?
Or to us.
Or to us. But we cannot ignore the fact that, for instance, if you take a family plan under CDHP Gold and you max out on your expenses in FY18,
Right.
you will spend $1,230 less than you spent in FY17.
I don't, maybe I'm wrong, but I think we paid, because of you're saying the average out of pocket you're
Correct,
counting in
which
as
is-
well, so that's not, I mean, our premiums are, but some people may not have reached that $1,200 in average out of pocket. So I see what you're saying, yep.
Some could have more.
Some could, yeah,
Some could have had more.
yeah,
But anyway, so we're looking at, in terms of real, you know, take-home compensation, your actual net compensation will be higher in FY18, even if we didn't do an adjustment to salary.
yeah, if the gold CDHP plan is selected, I agree, yes.
Correct. Okay. So now let's go to the salary, and let me give you some new grids.
Okay.
And there should be 2 sheets here for everyone, FY18 and FY19. And what I'd say is just
Is this different than what
disregard
you said?
whatever you had.
Oh, disregard it? It's
No,
not-
everybody should have 2 sheets.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
two, sorry.
2 sheets. One should say FY18 at the top, and
Okay.
one should say FY19.
Okay.
The other one looks like FY19.
Yep.
Steve? Do you have enough?
Did you get that cost comparison?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and let me walk you through this with, you know, what was my memo trying to explain this.
Yeah.
So, the FY18 grid, as I mentioned in my memo, is really the FY17 grid with a couple changes. Okay? In other words, there's nothing, the amount in cell 4, let me get my FY17 grid. If you,
Yeah, cell 4 is the same,
Yep.
17 and
Exactly.
18, yeah.
yep, as it should be, with what our proposal is. So our proposal is, working from the FY17 grid, we eliminate step 3. So that's shown at the top in red. That step will no longer exist in the grid. So anyone hired in FY18 will be hired at $37,861, okay? And that will become the new hiring salary, which brings it up by about $1,500. Because we were looking at trying to move up to close to, you know, a $39,000 hiring salary. So that's part 1.
Will that be called step 3, or will that,
That it will be
Stay
step 4
4.
until we redo the grid,
gotcha.
okay? Because understand, we still have that hidden base number. Yeah, because we,
Here.
and you can see the index is on here, and
This is the.
we can't redo this unless we're gonna redo the entire index.
Okay.
Because these index factors, like the 1.138 at step 4, did you see that?
Yeah.
Yep,
That gets multiplied by the base number, which is the hidden base number, to give you the 37,861.
and who knows about that hidden base? Like, where is it?
In water.
Everybody knows.
No,
It
up
says
on
right at
top,
the
I
top.
see, I got it. No, I know, I'm just, like, do people think that that's just the base, according to people? Like, you keep saying the hidden base, but
Well,
that's the base.
It doesn't show up in the grid.
Right, yeah.
And so, and for instance, so sometimes grids get printed without this little bit at the top.
Gotcha.
Oh.
And if you don't have this little bit at the top, which says this is what the base is,
Yep.
It is confusing though, because you
Yeah.
think the base would be the starting salary.
Right.
And it is, we still have a starting salary, but the base on which all the other salaries are
Right.
calculated is not that number.
Right,
You get confused if somebody says, what's my base salary?
right. So, do you know, and maybe you don't have the answer, but do you know, like, whether when comparing apples, to apples between other districts, are we dealing with hidden bases or are we dealing with bases between, like, other districts? Because
you
I
have
mean,
to ask the question.
Yeah.
And some do and some don't.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I've discovered over the years, whoever prepared the grid understood there was I'll call it the hidden base, but they renumber the steps every time they eliminate one and add one,
Right.
which you really shouldn't be doing that, because then that suggests that BA step 1 is your base salary,
Right.
when in fact, everybody knows that, or should know, that no, there's a different number that is the base salary. Okay? But it's you've got to redo the index if you're going to redo and set
The grid.
a new base at your hiring salary, BA step, in this case, BA step 4.
Yep.
Okay, then the other thing we've done to the grid, second thing, is we added a step 20 for the master's columns. And that step is $1,000 more than step 19. Okay, now the current step increment is $1,530, but at this level, the board's proposal is that we're not going to do the full step increment.
And why, can I ask just the master's side of things? Like, why was that increase not included in the bachelor's 15, bachelor's 30?
In fact, I would say almost all salary grids that I work with cap the bachelor's degree columns. In fact, they cap them at points higher than what we're proposing to cap these here. Meaning that you simply, you can get to a certain level, but then you're frozen in the bachelor columns. And in fact, some of the indexes or the grids go over and they cap the master's column short of the top step on a grid. And so we're looking at this as consistent with other contracts, but also consistent with what we consider to be appropriate practice.
I mean, it's new practice for
It's
us. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and that's why it's being started at the levels where it is being started. But anyway, so we added a step 20, and then we identified the red cells in the BA columns as, we'll continue to show numbers in those cells for the purpose of this contract, but the two things happen with these. One, people in the red cells at this point do not get step movement. So if you're in BA 16, even though we provide step movement, our proposal is that that person is not going to get step movement to step 17. Okay? And people on those red cells will no longer get step movement. If they get additional degrees and can move laterally, then they will be able perhaps to advance further on steps, but they will be frozen. Also, anyone who is on, let's say, BA step 15 in FY17, they will not be able to advance into the red cells, so they will be kept at BA step 15. Okay? So the red cells become areas to which you cannot move and within which you do not move on a step basis. Okay? So then, consistent with those guidelines, everybody will get step movement who is eligible for it. And that means people in the master's columns on step 19, because we've added a new step, they will get, $1,000 for step advancement. People who in FY17 are on step 3 will advance to step 4, so they will get the $1,530 increment. Everybody else in the grid who gets step advancement will get the $1,530. And then we have 33 people we've identified who are impacted by the red cells, and they will each be given a stipend of $1,000, so that they will get $1,000 even though they will not advance a step.
Wait.
And then there is no addition to the base salary in FY18. The cost of that we estimate to be 2.42% new money to fund the step movements,
He said master's.
to provide, and that's the $1,000 step increment for the people in the master's columns, and that's also the $1,000 payment in lieu of step movement for the 33 people in the red squares. But we are, in terms of looking at the compensation that you're actually receiving in FY18, even though there's not a base increase, there is, in effect, if you take the CDHP Gold Plan, additional dollars, ranging from about $500 to $1,200, that would flow to the benefit of employees based on the insurance plan they get. So that's FY18. Any questions about that?
Not right now. No. Does anybody else have a question? Nope.
Okay, FY19. FY19, every cell in the grid, including the red cells, are increased by $1,000. over the amount in FY '18, plus a half a percent increase on the base salary, which results in every cell in the index also getting an additional increase that ranges in amount based on where you are in the index, in the grid. And we've got that being, 1.94% new money. And the result is that as of FY '19, we will have a hiring salary of $39,000, which was something I think all agreed would be an appropriate goal. And then the one further clarification that I need to make about this is that the red cells for the BA columns, that will not apply for CDC employees. It will only apply for school employees, because the CDC has much different hiring practices and is looking at much different degree issues than is the case with, all the other schools. Specifically, that there are employees that are hired at the CDC who may not even have a bachelor's degree or may not have a teaching license at the time they're hired, and it may be several years on the grid before they even get that.
So what does their step 20 look like then? Is it still NA?
There isn't a step
for
20
them?
in the BA section. They're step 19.
Okay, so they stay at step 19?
They stay at step 19.
They just don't
They move
freeze?
through the red.
They keep moving, is what you're saying?
Correct. Basically, for the CDC employees, the red will not apply. The red at the top will apply, so that the hiring salary for the CDC, increases. But and as I understand it, there are very few CDC employees over in the master's columns, that they're primarily in the bachelor's columns, and so they will have available to them all the way to step 19 in the bachelor column areas.
So their change will happen the following year. It would be no change for them, obviously FY '18. For if you're a CDC employee, because everybody, right? I mean, I know the starting would change, but they're not moving. The grid is essentially the same.
Correct. If there is a CDC employee on step 19.
Yep.
In FY '17.
Yep.
They'll still be on
Step 19.
step 19.
Right. With the same salary.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. But if there's a CDC employee on bachelor's step 17 in FY '17, they will advance to step 18 in FY '18. So they will get a step increase.
Will they get the $1,000? Because what was that $1,000 that
The
you were?
$1,000 in FY '19 is something that is going to the grid itself, as well as the base increase, so CDC employees would get that $1,000 in FY '19. But since CDC employees will have normal step movement in FY
18.
18, we're not looking at provide.
I guess if you're like an employee who's at 19, like, and you're not moving as far, like
Would they get the $1,000?
would they get to that?
We'll,
Yeah,
I'll defer to
okay.
the CDC and we'll see what they want to say about that. I don't know that they have that many people who are.
Yeah, not too many.
But certainly, if they're getting step movement, they're not.
Right. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, I know we're not able to respond. I really appreciate like the walkthrough. It is a lot more complicated proposal than I expected. I mean, with freezing and shifting and I was just hoping to see like a nice little grid change, you know, and look at it that way. So to me, there's a lot to comprehend and take in. Like, you know, freezing this, shifting that. It's a change of how, even with that step 20, with how things are rolling out. So I would be remiss, I think, to like comment on it without kind of talking with everybody and, you know, hearing from Norm, having him weigh in a little bit and look at it as well. So I don't know. The other thing that we were, I know you guys have right from the beginning talked about just a 2-year proposal, and we're pushing for a 3-year, you know, proposal. Is there? I know you've been adamant on your 2 years, and we've been pushing for the 3-year. But is there any like wiggle room in terms of looking at a 3rd year?
I'd have to talk to the
Okay.
council about
Yep.
that. But, you know, there's still a lot of things in play at the legislature, even for the first year of this contract, potentially. Because it's not a given that the governor's desire to claw back money is not going to happen. And and how that translates into future years in the contract, we'll have to see. But I don't see that we're in a position, I'll talk about it, but
Okay.
I'm not in a position to say right now that we should look at 3 years. What I would like to do, at a minimum, I've got a couple other things I'll address, but maybe give you an opportunity to caucus for a few minutes to see if you come up with any other questions about this proposal, so that when we adjourn here tonight, you're not in a situation that, you know, the first time you get together, you talk about it, you say, oh my gosh, we forgot to ask about
Right.
this, we forgot to ask
Yeah, I
about
would
that.
appreciate that.
And, you know, certainly be available to, you know, take questions outside of the negotiation session to the extent I can answer them.
And I think for us, what I would love to do is go back over some of those open items that we had from the last time.
Yep.
Maybe spend, you know, half hour, 40 minutes on those, kind of going through where we're at, and then we'll go and kind of caucus on the salary grid and come back and just answer any of those questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So on those, what I had was your proposal number 7 was this payment in advance for tuition, and we talked about Castleton and everything else. And I guess if it's not resolved, we don't see how we can do that. We're not providing payment in advance for tuition. The current situation, we believe, has worked out satisfactorily, and we've looked into, are there ways we could structure something with some other institutions, and that really doesn't work, so.
And Castleton was very direct in saying no when I asked the question. They wouldn't accept that program.
Okay.
They didn't even have to think about it.
They tried it with other schools. That's the thing.
On the issue of your proposal number 9, dealing with issues of, physical harm, potential assaults, and I know you would come back with some alternative language talking about referencing policies in the contract. We're not going to do that either, because it will create a situation where we end up having to negotiate the content of policies, or we have to have arbitrated the issue of whether there has been compliance with a policy. We have policies, we have language in the contract right now. You had indicated at one meeting that perhaps you can work with the language in the contract and see if that provides an adequate remedy if you believe that a supervisor is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But we think the language in the contract right now is sufficient to address employee concerns, and until we see that it's not, we'd like to stay with the current contract language.
So I think our proposal 8.14 was a direct reflection of what you guys had said you were looking for from us. And now we're hearing that's not what you wanted from us.
No, I think we said that we believe that there are policies in place that address these various issues, and that you should be looking to policies and not looking to contract language to address those issues. And maybe you misunderstood that to be a suggestion that the policy should be incorporated into the contract. That was not our intent. And, and if the policies are not effective, then we need to deal with that. But we have done a fair amount of inquiry into this, and we're not aware of the policies not being appropriate to address the concerns. If there is an issue here, maybe there is some breakdown in how the policies are being implemented. But we look at, if that is the case, the way to address that is to bring that to the attention of appropriate people, such as the building administrator or superintendent, so that we can address how the policies are being implemented. But the policies have been drafted with a fairly thorough consideration of issues, and I believe the ones that we have at least mentioned were drafted with an opportunity for teachers to participate and comment on the drafting of the policies prior to their being adopted by the various boards. And we would want to have any problems addressed through the policy process, given the complexity of some of these things. And if there, as I say, if there are problems with the policies not being followed, administrators need to know that, up to the highest level and ultimately the board if necessary, to see that the policies are followed, or if they're deficient, to see that they are revised.
Anybody?
I don't, it's not no comment. I don't understand how simply, I understand what you're saying. So putting the policy references into the contract, I don't see how that impacts your policy. All you're doing is referencing and saying, so if there's an issue, go look there and follow those policies. So how is that?
I think that's already in the faculty handbook. I mean, I don't think it's an issue of the faculty members not knowing that there are policies. I think faculty members know that there are policies. They should know that there are policies. So I don't see that it's a matter of providing some sort of further disclosure in the collective bargaining agreement. So.
Yeah, and I just think we're at the point where I hear what you are all saying. I think we're feeling from our members that there are people who feel that they're not necessarily supported by the policies and wanted a little bit more, kind of substance to it, which would be part of the contract, and just saying, hey, you have this, and we've got your back. So, and then maybe we've got to readjust how we're gonna approach it. So, okay, I know what you're saying on number 9 on the list. Go ahead.
Then your proposal 12, dealing with in-service days, and we have talked about that extensively, and we've gone over it and had it discussed with administrators, and, in terms of the in-service days currently in the contract, a number of them are primarily for the benefit of teachers to do grading, to set up their classrooms, et cetera. And so there are other in-service days which are for the purpose of training, instruction, et cetera.
Yep.
Get it. And as we have talked about it, certainly see the benefit of trying to do this on a basis where maybe it's a half day each month, something like that. We've been struggling with how we could effectively implement that, with the schedule of not only teachers, but of parents and students and everything else. And I would say that, maybe there will be further review of this, but for purposes of this contract, we haven't been able to come up with a way to address that, and putting it in terms of hours doesn't accomplish anything if the result is that we are still basically scheduling on a one, here's a day, here's a day.
And we're okay with the days. We are okay with the days at this point. And I think one of the things that we're looking for is having flexibility in case a year from now or this summer, somebody comes up with a, like, I've got a way that we can do this, that you guys aren't supposed to have all the, answers, and everybody, maybe somebody has an idea. And so to me, just having that flexibility in there, even if it's, if you have 9 in-service days and, there are 5 of them that are district or whatever, or building based, and however you want to, define it, and you're looking at 7-hour days or 8-hour days, or however, just defining them by hours for this contract, even if it's like, we don't know how we're going to do it, and if we use them as full days, we use them as full days. That's the way. I know the calendar's already set for next year, so it's not something that we're going to rework for this coming year, because they've already, printed the calendar. But just having those hours out there to say, look, out of you have, instead of 5, days, you now have 40 hours worth of in-service. And if they're done in 5 days, they're done in 5 days. But if somebody can kind of work something, we wanted just the flexibility to be able to, to get creative, or have somebody, because I know there are teachers and there are administrators and there are central office folks who are on the professional development, the professional learning committee, and to be able to have, some flexibility, I think is what we're looking at. So even if it's the same amount of days, and next year we know that it's days, we just want to start the process of having this ongoing professional development rather than the once every, 4 months or something. So that's what we were hoping for.
But I guess part of it is, I don't see, we see how doing that mathematical conversion of saying, instead of the 9 days, it's 63 hours. It doesn't change anything, but it leaves the door open for the next, the future
For
years
creativity.
without having, for creativity. And I think if you talk to the curriculum developer, et cetera, curriculum director and our assistant superintendent, and even that they would like that flexibility.
Okay, we'll revisit that. And then finally, your proposal 13, which was ensuring that elementary school teachers have at least 45 minutes of prep time each day of the week. And we've worked on that, and to put language in the contract at this point that would mandate that would tie the hands of our building administrators unreasonably. We believe that they're doing everything they can to see that elementary school teachers have preparation time during the work week. And they will continue to explore ways to adjust schedules in individual schools to address that. But we feel good that we're meeting the requirements of the contract right now. You acknowledge that that we are meeting the sort of on average arrangement that is allowed, so that there is some flexibility available for administrators, but to have a rigid requirement of 45 minutes a day is something that...
I don't think that's rigid, 45 minutes of
well,
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I do wonder why the administrators would, like you say, they're trying to make it. Why would they try to make it work if what they have is good enough for them right now? I don't think having an elementary teacher not have any time off during a day is good for the students or good for our teachers. And I don't think it's a rigid requirement to get, some time. And if 45 minutes is where, that's too much, and we want to talk about, 40 minutes or 30, we can talk about that, but I don't think just leaving it and saying our administrators are doing the best they can, and if an elementary school teacher has to work all day besides lunch, then so be it. They're doing the best they can. I don't think that's fair for our students or for our teachers. So.
Is part of this problem because of the way we blocked out the classes? So as that changes, even if you said 45 minutes, if we're changing the schedules all the time now because of the number of students and so forth, it makes it harder to be rigid in that type of time in the elementary school. I think that's one of the reasons why we hear what we're hearing from the administrators, that it works for them the way it is, and they make sure they meet the contractual agreement, even though some days there's not, and the next day they give them twice as much.
I know, but I don't think that works, though. I mean, I know contractually it works because you're doing an average, but I don't think that's good practice at all. So,
Well, it's all on how they set up, well, I don't want to get into the teaching.
Some of them have a 6-day schedule. And in order to do that, they have to have a person who's there to cover the class. So it's about coverage. It isn't just about time.
was it the timing? Is it the time? I guess I'm just confused as to where the rigidness. You guys talk to the administrators, and I hear from most of them, and from that. Yeah, the 6-day thing maybe doesn't work, and we're trying to change some of that. But why would saying we need this time off be such a would handcuff them? I guess is part of it.
Let me throw it to you in a different way. We say 9 days for in-school training. You're saying let's do hours. We're saying let's do hours versus the 45 minutes each day. You have your issues with what you want to get in that side. We have our issues based on what we do now with class times and days of the week we schedule classes. It's a matter of working out how those things can be managed, and I think the administrators are the ones that really know their school and know how many teachers they have and how many students and how they have to manage it. Otherwise, the kids first, you want to make sure they get taught.
100%.
The final comment is simply to say that we've discussed it with the administrators, and we do not feel that we can agree to the language you have proposed, and that the current language in the contract is, from our perspective, satisfactory language that is reasonable and appropriate and provides reasonable preparation time for elementary school teachers. And I understand that you may disagree,
Correct.
and there we are.
Okay. Anybody else?
So why don't we call a caucus and at least go over and talk about some of the issues that you've brought up. Give you a chance to take a glance at the salary schedule. If there are any questions, we can move on. Of the last meeting, I'd like a motion to
So moved.
have a second.
Second,
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye. Abstain? Questions? Thank you very much. Thank you, Richard.
So do we want to, I mean, we can talk about what we just went, but do we want to talk about Steve said there's a problem potentially with the June 12th.
We'll get back
You want to
to
get
you
back
on
to,
that.
okay.
Yes.
But we have set Tuesday,
The 30th.
June
Tuesday the
30th
30th,
as our next.
May
yeah.
30th.
Or May 30th.
May
day
30th.
after.
Okay.
I'm like,
Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
not
May
you.
30th, sorry, May 30th.
At 3 o'clock. I mean, we'll be here at 3 before.
4 o'clock,
4
4 o'clock,
Yeah.
right. So we did run through some discussions as far as the salary part. No questions that, things that we didn't understand. I think I'm comfortable leaving it today without kind of talking through with Norm and some of our other reps, is that I am hoping, and most of my hopes, happen, but I'm hoping to have a counter proposal for you by next Tuesday. So bring that in. If we have it ahead of time, I will email it to you ahead of time. We will try our best. If you could, Steve, send me, because you sent a PDF of it, if you could send the grid in Excel form, it would do me so much better than having to retype all that. And so then we'll work off of that. And then we went through some of the points that you guys were that you had gone over, starting with our proposal number 7, and with the prepay of the courses. We're fine with. I know that Ed reached out, and it was a want, a request, not necessarily a need. We were kind of hoping that it could work, but we're fine moving on from that. We didn't hear back from you on number 8, which the last we had on the national board was you were going to work up a TA on that. Remember, we were going to do it in components, and I don't think we have, we've seen it. So, so that was just something we had talked about, as that you were going to pay that out, and
We were going to do it in 2 sections for the
what did we?
There's 4 components.
4
There's
components. I think it was 4
Okay, it was
components.
4,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
As each component.
So each component would be,
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
You're fine.
okay.
Yes.
So, okay, perfect.
Right.
And then we talked about the our number 9, and we're discussing that and how we as an association can move forward maybe in a different direction. We still think it's an issue, but maybe we can deal with it as a non-contractual issue. You were going to talk about number 12 a little bit and discuss it. That still is something that we think is good, flexibility. So we're not ready to kind of relinquish the hours and the days. As far as the professional development, we'd love, and I don't know who you've spoken to or if you've spoken to anybody, but we'd love to have Assistant Superintendent Leap and Laura Boudreau, and have some people weigh in on that. They have said, oh, we wish we could have more flexibility. So I'm just, urging you to reach out to your, your members of the central office and see if this is something that would be a benefit to them. And then number 13, we're not ready to. It's too important for us to say, okay, we'll stick with regular contractual language. So that's still open as far as we can tell. So we're going to still agree to disagree on number 13 as of right now. And I don't know if I left anything off of that. So I think the next meeting, I don't know if you guys had anything that you spoke of or talked about, but I think the next meeting for us, for the most part, is going to be based on the counter proposal of the salary grid, and then anything more of those numbers that we've kind of just went over.
Good.
We have dates in July to meet.
Well,
Okay.
July.
We're,
let's wait.
right now, we're just
Let's wait, we're
coming
May the
back on
30th, yeah.
May
Yeah, over
30th.
June.
And I'll say that if, from my perspective, we get a counter proposal, from you on salary at the beginning of the next session. I'm hoping that, with the board team, that we'll be able to respond and perhaps have an active negotiation of salary as opposed to, I understand, this is the first time we have presented a salary proposal. And, yours was presented, but it's a fairly traditional, straightforward step plus 3.5%.
Right.
So not a whole lot to understand about that. But I would hope that we could have some real back and forth. And so I know from the board's perspective, we have our business manager here, so that if we want to look at alternatives, we will be able to crunch the numbers right at the meeting and come back with counter proposals. And I know that in past negotiations with Norm and whatever, he has the numbers right there and he crunches through. So, and I don't know if he's going to be here. But
We're hoping.
okay.
Yep.
I would just hope that we could get involved in that sort of back and forth.
Right.
Right. And we had talked about earlier that we may want to extend the hours rather than 6 o'clock deadline, particularly if we could crunch some numbers and not have to wait a week or 2 weeks to
For
come
sure.
up with a counter proposal or to come up with, some modification in whoever's proposal we're discussing.
And you guys start, meeting at 3, I know. So, I mean, it will be, emailed to you prior to
Yeah, so
that.
hopefully
you
we can make some intelligent.
Yeah, we won't come and present it at 4 o'clock for the first time. So that is my hope, to have something for you guys and then be able to kind of work through that. And then any of the other ones that we're still, open to, if you guys have counter proposals for any of them, or like language you want to adjust, we seem to be kind of working off of our proposal, right now. So feel free to offer, alternative language to something that you guys can agree to.
Very good.
All right.
If there are no other questions, ask
So moved to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.